Hail Mary pass. It's a, let's put it this way. If it was such great shakes, we would have deployed it to Ukraine already to stop all those Russian missiles. Okay? It's basic proven abilities on what they call short-range missiles, rockets. The mid-range, iffy. So, frankly, anything that Iran would be firing would be in that mid to long-range category, which means the THAAD's likely to be very ineffective. But, the purpose I think you alluded to in your original question, it's to put U.S. soldiers there in the presence so that when they get killed, we can fuel the outrage against Iran, and many can try to pursue this long-held dream to destroy Iran and bring back the Shah. There's not a single area you can point to where they're able to say, hey, you know what? The Russians aren't killing as many of us this month. Or we have tripled our recruiting goals. My goodness, we're having to beat away people with sticks at the door. They can't wait to join up. Yeah, none of that's happening. You don't see the West going, you know what? We got a ton of extra 155 millimeter shells. We don't know what to do with them. Would this be helpful to you guys? No. So the West is unable to provide artillery shells, the barrels on these howitzers that have been shot out so that they need to be replaced, and they don't have replacements. Tanks, no. Armored personnel carriers, no. And so the list goes on. And even if those elements are provided, it still doesn't change the fundamental weakness of Ukraine: manpower, lack of trained manpower.
Larry Johnson's insights cast a critical light on the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system and the underlying motives of placing U.S. soldiers in such vulnerable positions in the Middle East. According to Johnson, while the THAAD system has demonstrated success against short-range projectiles, its ability to intercept mid- to long-range missiles, like those Iran would likely deploy, is questionable at best. This reality brings to light two crucial points: the true effectiveness of THAAD in this context and the strategic intentions behind positioning U.S. forces in harm's way. The THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, system was initially designed for intercepting ballistic missiles in their terminal phase of flight. However, as Johnson notes, its efficacy declines significantly when facing mid- to long-range missiles that may be launched from Iran. Given that Iran's missile arsenal includes a range of projectiles with varied trajectories and evasive capabilities, THAAD may struggle to intercept these effectively, especially over long distances. Moreover, relying on THAAD for defense assumes an ideal scenario where each missile is intercepted before it reaches its target. In practice, missile defense systems face challenges, from the sheer volume of incoming missiles to countermeasures that adversaries employ to overwhelm defenses. Iran, with its advanced missile capabilities and support from allies like Russia, is likely aware of these limitations and may capitalize on them, should a conflict arise. Johnson suggests that the true purpose of deploying THAAD and U.S. troops in volatile areas isn't just about defense but rather political positioning. By placing U.S. soldiers in the line of fire, there is an implicit calculation that casualties could rally public sentiment against Iran, potentially justifying broader military action or even regime change efforts. This approach plays on an age-old strategy, using the sacrifice of soldiers as a means to generate public outrage, which can be a powerful catalyst for support in a prolonged conflict. For decades, the idea of regime change in Iran has persisted within certain U.S. foreign policy circles. By establishing a U.S. military presence close to Iranian forces, the stage is set for a potential incident that could serve as a pretext for escalating military involvement. Should American troops become casualties in the region, public opinion could shift quickly, with calls for retribution providing the political capital needed to take action against Iran. This strategy isn't new. Historically, U.S. foreign policy has occasionally placed forces in tense regions, knowing full well the risks involved, as a way of positioning troops as deterrents and, if necessary, symbols of justified intervention. Johnson also points out the lack of logistical and material support that the West has struggled to maintain in Ukraine, highlighting a broader issue of resource limitations that would likely affect any similar campaign in the Middle East. In Ukraine, Western countries have faced significant challenges in supplying artillery shells, armored vehicles, and trained personnel. Ukraine's forces are grappling with depleted artillery stocks, worn-out howitzer barrels, and limited tank reinforcements, all of which impede their defensive and offensive capabilities. This situation offers a stark reminder of the logistical demands involved in sustaining a military campaign. The lack of sufficient ammunition and equipment resupply has led to a prolonged attritional struggle in Ukraine, a war of endurance that has drained Western military resources and strained defense manufacturing capacities. This same shortfall could become a critical factor in a hypothetical conflict with Iran, particularly if the U.S. and its allies find themselves needing to support multiple theaters of conflict simultaneously. The lessons from Ukraine show that any large-scale conflict with Iran would require extensive preparation, supply chain adjustments, and a consistent influx of personnel, something that Western nations have found increasingly difficult to sustain. Even if Western allies were able to overcome these logistical barriers, Johnson argues, Iran's significant manpower reserves and trained forces would present a formidable challenge in any prolonged confrontation. The discussion of manpower touches on a crucial point: the Western nation's shortage of willing and able recruits for sustained military efforts. Unlike Ukraine, where military service has surged due to the existential threat from Russia, Western countries have struggled to fill their ranks, partly due to lessened enthusiasm for foreign interventions. Without public support for extended overseas deployments, the idea of mobilizing a large force to confront Iran may face significant political resistance. Johnson's commentary suggests that, despite the presence of advanced weaponry, a deficit in trained personnel and public support could hinder any campaign against Iran. Recent history has shown that military campaigns rely not only on sophisticated weapons, but also on a steady flow of motivated and trained personnel, a resource that may be lacking in Western societies wary of further entanglement in Middle Eastern conflicts. Johnson also points out that the portrayal of systems like THAAD as foolproof defenses may create unrealistic expectations among both the public and military leadership. When leaders present these systems as highly effective, the public may believe in a level of invulnerability that simply isn't achievable in real-world combat situations. Should THAAD fail to intercept Iranian missiles effectively, the resulting disillusionment could impact public morale and faith in the military's ability to protect national interests. This disconnect between projected success and actual capability often leads to what Johnson refers to as fabrication, the framing of unremarkable achievements as major victories to maintain public confidence. However, if THAAD and similar systems fail to perform as advertised, the consequences could extend beyond military setbacks, affecting trust in leadership and support for the broader strategy. For the public, the reality of modern warfare's complexity and unpredictability may prove disconcerting, leading to a reevaluation of the costs and benefits of military interventions. In essence, Larry Johnson's analysis raises critical questions about the viability of escalating conflict with Iran. He suggests that deploying U.S. troops and advanced weaponry might be less about direct confrontation and more about creating conditions that could justify broader intervention. However, given the logistical, political, and strategic hurdles involved, such a strategy might prove unsustainable. The limitations in Western military supplies, as seen in Ukraine, highlight potential vulnerabilities that could hinder any extended campaign against a well-armed and resourceful opponent like Iran. Johnson's insights challenge policymakers to reconsider the wisdom of relying on systems like THAAD as panaceas for regional threats. A strategy rooted in creating deterrence through symbolic deployments might backfire, with unintended consequences that could lead to deeper entanglements. As tensions continue to rise, the question remains: are we prepared for the complexities of a conflict that could easily extend beyond the borders of Iran, drawing in allies and adversaries alike? According to Larry Johnson, let's put it this way: if the THAAD system were highly effective, we'd have already sent it to Ukraine to counter Russian missiles. The system's strength lies in targeting short-range missiles and rockets, while its effectiveness with mid-range missiles is questionable. Anything Iran might fire would likely fall into the mid to long-range category, meaning THAAD's effectiveness would be limited. But as you suggested, deploying THAAD is less about missile defense and more about positioning U.S. soldiers in harm's way. This increases the likelihood of American casualties, which could then be used to justify heightened hostilities with Iran, pushing forward a long-standing agenda to destabilize Iran. In Ukraine, the situation reveals the West's limitations. There's no surge in recruits or abundance of artillery. On the contrary, Ukraine is struggling with a manpower shortage, a lack of trained personnel, and worn-out equipment. Tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery shells are all in short supply, and even if provided, they wouldn't resolve Ukraine's underlying weaknesses. Thanks for watching.